I'm really pleased today to talk to you about accessibility and inclusion. That's a topic I became really passionate about. And so I'm Sara. I'm a white woman in my 30s. I have thick, large glasses and long brown straight hair. If you think this introduction sounds a little bit strange, it's because it's come from the self-description for inclusive meetings. You can learn more about it about vocalize.co.uk, and this kind of description helps people that are not able to see me. As Tobias was mentioning, I'm the head of customer experience for TechOps, that is the Thoughtworks IT department, and we have over 450 people around the world. It's the largest distributed function we have at Thoughtworks, and we serve 12,000 workers. So what to expect from this presentation? I want to share with you 3 aha moments that I had in my accessibility journey. I started a bit, I think around 9 months ago, and I was quite ignorant about the topic, but I was receiving some tickets and some emails about people struggling with our internal software or with some of the software that we use. So I quickly realized I needed to become very knowledgeable in a short amount of time. And I spent hours interviewing some of the amazing workers. We talked about with experts, but also with digitally challenged workers. And they helped me to shift my behaviors, to upgrade my thoughts. These are the 3 things I believe to be true before I started my journey. So accessibility is good for people. Accessibility is about designing for disabilities, and accessibility is for expert. And it turned out along my journey that those are not accurate, and there's more to it. So, but let's discover them together one at a time. Before, I'll ask you to answer this poll. I'd love to know more about where you're at in your accessibility journey, if you haven't started or if you are already an expert. So please take a minute to answer. We can come back to these results later in the talk. So shift number 1, accessibility is good for people. And this is hard to argue against, right? Accessibility in particular, within digital accessibility, we allow people to be autonomous and to complete the task they set out to do. Actually, when we go back to the vision for the World Wide Web, and you might recognize here Tim Berners-Lee, that is the inventor of the World Wide Web. He was already thinking about how the web could be a place accessible by everyone, regardless of what I learned is that accessibility is also very good for business. And here are some numbers. So the size of the opportunity is very interesting. So 15% of the world's population, that's actually 1 billion people, experience some forms of disability. The click away pound, have you ever heard of this term? The click away pound is the money that are left in the shopping cart of the e-commerce from people that are not able to complete the transaction, the purchase, due to accessibility issues. And in the UK alone, this is 17 billion of pounds. The purple dollar, that is the spending power of disabled household, is 8 trillion. And 68% of global consumers say that they would remain loyal to brand if they practice social responsibility. The other interesting data is that the bar is pretty low because 98% of the home pages actually have accessibility errors, and they are difficult to access. So there's a huge opportunity that has been not exploited yet. So in business terms, we can say that accessibility is good for brand differentiation. It's a good time to start positioning the brand as a socially responsible one. It can help you grow market share. We talk about how it can expand your customer base and get loyal customers. And it's good for compliance. So depending on your country and your industry, certain accessibility standard might be required. So it's a huge opportunity. And if we ignore it, it can damage our brand reputation. So it's always more common to see negative customer review on apps and social media. It can bring you to lose market shares. We are seeing how customers are moving or prefer companies that are socially responsible, and lawsuits. So the American Accessibility Act is already in place. You might have heard that the European Accessibility Act will start its effect from June 2025. And there are also guidelines for critical services like banking. If you haven't already, it's quite interesting to learn about the popular lawsuits around accessibility. Some of them are Target, Netflix, Nike, Amazon, and even Beyonce. So we talked about the shift number one, that is accessibility is good for people. So I was right, but I didn't know it was also so good for business. And let's talk about shift number two. So shift number two is accessibility is about designing for disabilities, right? It's learning how to design for people with disabilities. That's what I thought at the beginning. This slide represents fairly well how I thought about disability, my mental model. 4 separate boxes. There is visual, hearing, motor, and cognitive. When I started to talk to people, I realized that my thinking was quite outdated. And in reality, some people might present more than one of those disabilities. And each one of those disabilities actually come within its spectrum. So if we talk about visual, for example, not everyone that is visually impaired is also blind. So the complexity and the uniqueness is something that I was completely misunderstanding. I want you to listen some of the interviews that I did. In particular, this one was one of the first one. And Carla, that was also part of my team, she shared about autism. So here we go. Can you describe any digital challenges that you're facing?
Yes. First, I'd like to be clear that I'm talking about my personal experiences, and I'm not speaking for all autistic people because we are all different. But one of the things that are really difficult for me are pop-ups and cookie banners. They are unpredictable. Normally when you're scrolling down, they come from nowhere and they get out of my control. And when things go out of control for me, I get really anxious and nervous. So this is the number one no for me, because pop-ups are really difficult. We normally have meltdowns whenever there is a change in our plans. So if I'm trying to read something like the website and I'm scrolling down, and sometimes the text has to fit some ads or moving banners, and if the pop-ups come from nowhere, as I said, I get really anxious. And depending on the day, if I'm not very well on that day, I have sometimes to close the web page and leave the computer for a while so I can reorganize myself again and then get back to whatever I was doing.
So when I interviewed Carla, I'd been in the industry for over 10 years designing digital products, and I was clueless about some of the effects of my choices on people within the spectrum of autism. I think that the meltdown and the fact that people might have to step back from their computer because they're feeling anxious was a really cold shower for me, a big aha moment. I want you to listen also to Voldemar. He shares about visual impairment, and in particular about how someone with visual impairment interacts with software. Let's have a look.
Absolutely. So one of the most difficult things when I browse the internet is to understand how to actually use those websites, because my behavior on using this website is I always have to zoom in to be able to read the content. And many websites do not consider this use case. Like, they have built a website which looks pretty nice and is awesome, but they don't check how it looks like when you zoom in. So maybe I'll just show it to you by an example what I mean and where I exactly struggle. You see my screen?
Yes.
Awesome. So here you can see I'm currently in Summit. And that's like the screen size I have to zoom in, or the font size I have to zoom in to be able to read things. So now, if I type my comments here for my regular check-ins, how do I send those? I have absolutely no clue what to do now with my, is it saved already? Or, yeah, basically I had to scroll to the site to find out, oh, here are actually buttons that I could use, which, yeah, took me, like, I'm not lying, it took me 15 minutes to figure that out because I just wasn't thinking about scrolling to the site.
So again, choices like alignment on left rather than right, that probably was just a decision driven by aesthetic. I can't believe that put someone like Voldemar into a situation where he had to spend 15 minutes just to submit his check-in. And there are a lot more stories that I heard that helped me to understand that it's not only about designing for disabilities, but it should be about designing for all. So one of the concepts that I really love is the universal design concept. So that it's about, if you can design for disabilities, it actually means that you can design better products for all. Make product and environment accessible for all people, regardless of age, disability, and other factors. So this is about stepping up our game altogether. And the other reason to do so is that the line between being disabled or not sometimes is not so blurry. It's not so defined. Sometimes it's blurry. For example, one of the sentences that I really loved from one of the interview was, I'm not disabled. It's the environment or the product that I use that made me feel disabled. It's a perception. I don't always feel disabled. And it wouldn't be amazing to shape environments and products that don't make people feel disabled. The other concept is about, is actually data. At some point in time, everyone will experience disability. I'm sure you already have, and if you haven't, you will. If we are lucky, we're all gonna get older, for example. But I'm sure you've been injured, or maybe you've been pregnant, you've been in a country where you didn't speak the language, all of those can be considered situational and temporary disability. So we always talk about disability as something permanent, but it acquires another depth when we bring in also situational and temporary disability as well. Do you recognize some of those products? I bet you do. So there is a voice assistant, a smart speaker, captioning. So these technology, actually, they have their roots into accessibility. They were born to support people with disability, but they turned out pretty handy for all. For example, I don't know, when I'm cooking and I have my hands dirty, I just set timers using Alexa, or I'm clearly not an English native speaker, so I watch most of my movies with captioning and subtitles. And I should verify that information, but if I'm not wrong, that the subtitles in Netflix are actually consequence of the lawsuit to Netflix. So isn't it amazing that accessibility can fuel innovation for all? So let's recap the first two shifts. The first one was accessibility is good for people, yes, and it's also good for business. The second one is accessibility is more than just designing for disabilities. It's about designing better products for all. So let's look into number 3. That was about accessibility is for experts. When I started, I really thought accessibility is for experts. And I honestly felt a little bit overwhelmed with all the information and knowledge I thought I needed to acquire. The reality is that you can do something about it today, and I'll show you how. When I felt lost and didn't know where to start, this slide was a revelation for me. So this comes from the Web Accessibility in Mind website that in 2020, they analyzed 1 million homepages for accessibility issues. And they shared that 98% of the top 1 million homepages have accessibility failures. And the average of errors is 60. So this shows how low the bar is. Just reading at this data, I thought it must be really difficult to do accessibility. But then digging a little bit deeper, I saw how actually the causes of most common accessibility failures are not rocket science. Low contrast text, missing image, alt text, empty links, empty buttons. So I'm not a developer, but I know what we're talking about. And this is usually good semantics and good development practices. Let me show you a few examples. So low contrast text. So this is number 1 cause of failures. It's fairly easy to avoid. This is my tool of choice. There are plenty, but you can actually take a foreground color, a background color, and just check the ratio. So in this case, you can see how this flamingo pink mostly fails on a white background. It passes only when it's bold. Let's see what changes if we make this black, for example. Passes everywhere. So just using a simple tool like this can help you to avoid, in first place, accessibility, low contrast error, or fix it. So avoiding is the number 1 choices, but at least fix it. You know how to do it now. The second cause was missing alt text. So alt text is that description that goes alongside a picture, so that if you are not able to see the picture, you can hear a description. Sometimes that text is missing, or sometimes it's just not accurate. Imagine there is this picture and you can't see it, and all you can hear is pic.jpg. That's not very helpful. Or maybe Office. That's not enough. What you want to hear is an accurate description of the image. 3 women sitting at the table working on their laptop, In the background, there is a white wall, a large window covered in Post-it. So that description is doing a much better service. Something maybe you didn't know is that also in Google Slides, you can actually include alt text to make your slides more accessible. What else? So one good place to start is to measure accessibility in your digital products. And some people say if you don't measure, it doesn't exist, or if you don't measure it, you can't improve it. Well, here is an easy way to start. There is this tool, and I'll show you in a minute, that is available on every Chrome browser that allows you to find out what is the accessibility score for a page. So let's have a look. I have selected this website to test. This is, as Tobias was saying, I'm based in Italy. This is the website of the Italian government. I'm just in a Chrome browser, so I double click, inspect, and here I start searching for a lighthouse. So with some simple setting like accessibility and desktop, I can launch the test, and this will, if it works, give me back the accessibility score for the page. You can see the accessibility score, 75, as this number goes from 1 to 100, so 75 is not a great number. You can see it's color-coded amber. What are the top mistakes? Not a surprise. Images don't have alt attributes. Links do not have discernible names. And there's not enough contrast. A tool like this allows you to surface where the problems are and to fix them. We have seen that fixing some of those issues is not as hard. At Thoughtworks, we put a lot of effort to improve our website and make it accessible. It's a journey. Not all our pages are 100% accessible, but we're trying really hard to get to that point. One other thing I can show you that is quite interesting and you can try is that there are a lot of also extensions that can help you to see things differently. For example, something that I've started to do is one of my teammates is colorblind, and at some point I had created a slide with using color coded for urgency and priority, and he couldn't read it. So now it's quite common that I test my slides for people that are colorblind, just to make sure that he will be able to access my content. So we talked about how to improve and fix accessibility issues. But what would be even better is to build accessibility in right from the start. And there are simple tips on how you can do so. For example, you can include people with situational and temporary disability in your team. You can use them as persona, and you should definitely always include them in testing your products. That will result in better products for all. If you are a leader and not a practitioner, there are things for you to do as well. So the first step is to create awareness, start talking about accessibility and its importance, and start to build and hire the capabilities. One simple step can be to ask your team to measure accessibility. What we have seen is automated testing. There's a lot more depth in manual testing, but that's a good start. And start setting expectation about where you want your digital products to be. Another option that's quite fun is organizing an accessibility hackathon. So every year there is Global Accessibility Awareness Day. This year was on 19th of May, and it could be a great practice to introduce one day where everyone in the company works towards improving accessibility. So let's recap before the end. Accessibility is good for people and is also good for business. Accessibility is more than designing just for disabilities, is about designing better product for all. And accessibility is not only for experts. You can do something about it today. Those are the people I have to thank for helping me to upgrade my belief system toward accessibility. All of those people share with me precious insights and stories about disability, accessibility, and inclusion. And before the end of the call, I'd love you to answer the final poll. I want to make sure and check if you have upgraded your belief system on accessibility as well. Thank you.
The poll is just starting now, Sarah, and we wait a few seconds for the answers to come in, and then I guess we'll pick up from there. So we have the answers coming in. Should I read them for you, Sarah? Is that the easiest?
Yeah, sure.
Accessibility is about 93% said designing better products for all. 7% said designing for people with disabilities, and that was me clicking the wrong button. And I meant to click the other one. I'm very sorry, honestly. So I guess we're almost 100% there. The next one, 23% think for business accessibility is an opportunity to differentiate. 25% an opportunity to increase revenue. 21% a legal obligation, and 31% an opportunity to innovate. What do you make of that, Sarah?
The shift has started. The ship has started.
That's great. And we do have time for some questions. So folks, if you want to post more questions in the chat, give it a go. I'll watch them. There's great feedback coming in, really actionable material, wonderful. People learned a lot. And yeah, there's one comment from earlier, specifically, Sarah, I want to present to you. The mindset shift, people are not disabled, environment and product can disable us. Great way to think. So honest question, why do you think don't more people shift their mindset? It appears to be not so hard to do. Where's the what's the simplest first step they can start with to go on that journey? Yeah,
and I think if it's easy, why people don't do it? And they just don't know. It's up to people like us that have been exposed to this content to be advocate and share and bring people along this journey. Because once you start, it really enriches us as people, as professionals, and help us to have a better impact in the world. So my story, I've been in the industry for over 10 years, and I didn't know about half of the things I took today 9 months ago. But if I got to learn it in such a short amount of time, everyone else can. Where to start? I really like to start simple. So even just when you go back to work, measure the accessibility score of your homepage and send the results to the team that's responsible for it. Did they know? Do they care? And they'll take it from there.
I love that. And has there been some observations or learnings where you think this really brings you further? This is something you can recommend also for people to go out there and share and spread the word and help building and shifting the mindset.
Absolutely. Like, I think my biggest problem when I started is that I was afraid to talk about it. First, I'm not an English native speaker, and I was really worried to use the wrong word and to offend people. And don't be. It's more important to advance this than to make some mistakes. And you will, but you will also do a lot of good for everyone who design products, for professionals around you, and for your organization.
Love that. Sarah, we have questions coming in now, more popping in. That's great. So I want to start with the one apart from the basic accessibility things like contrast, alt text, etc. Question is, what has been the most surprising design change that could be made? Is there anything you should highlight specifically?
The biggest failure, accessibility.
The most surprising design change that can be made.
It's not in the screen, it's in your head. The most surprising change is not on the screen, is in our head. It's about how we think about this, because the product that we build are just a reflection of what's in our head, and I would add in our heart.
I like that. And I know already what you're saying to the next one, because I also find it interesting to connect that to how you do it in the daily work. So the question is, what have been your biggest barriers to getting buy-in from, say, brand guardians, designers in making designs more accessible, for example, when their colors don't lend to accessible designs?
As I mentioned, my team at the moment is over 450 people, so it's quite a lot of folks, and I got different reactions. The most common was, "I'm sorry, I didn't know." That was number one reaction. Number two was, "I didn't know. How do I get better at this?" So awareness, capability. I also had some conflicts. For example, now I had to redo my work. How does it fit in the priorities? And that is always going to be there. But without having that awareness and starting to build some of the capability, you can't even move the conversation forward.
Yeah, that strikes out to me.
One thing is, I think that not doing accessible products should be a choice. So people should know where they stand in the accessibility spectrum, and then they decide if they don't want to do it or if they do want to do it. What I see today, it's a lot of lack of awareness. So they just don't know. If they only could watch Carla's video or Voldemort video, the reaction that I got from showing those video to the relevant team are incredible. It's really difficult not to take action after you've seen something like that. That empathy just kicks in because we're human.
Yeah, I get you. So one question, small about tools, which you would probably suggest. Is there any open source tool to implement screen readers on the product that you would recommend?
Yeah, so the easiest is to go with the screen reader already available on your machine and start practicing with that. There's a lot of free tooling already available. If you just search for it. There's great free content, free tooling, and I think that will cover all the basics. Even for companies that sometimes they tell me we don't have the budget, and I hear that, but the reality is that sometimes you don't need a budget to start building on that capability. We have seen how simple it's to use Google Lighthouse that's in every Chrome browser, and it only takes a couple of minutes. So start with what you already have in your machine and available in the tools that you already use. That's a great start.
Awesome. I want to get back to the poll we had earlier. Sarah, it's really interesting. 42% of people said they're beginners, 38% said intermediate. A few said have not started or consider themselves to be advanced. Have you been surprised by that statistic, or would you have expected that one?
I think I imagine that this is not the population outside, because this is already selected people that decided to be in this conference and in particular in this track. So the data is biased. If we look out there, I believe that there's a lot of people that haven't started yet or are only at the beginning. There is some encouraging data. For example, Forrester published that only in 2022, the amount of job people hired with job title with accessibility in it has raised by 70%.
Wow.
So things are moving, and it will take years. I really like if you think about the evolution of architecture. With architecture, we didn't think it needed to be accessible right away. It was a long process, laws were put in place, and now we would almost be offended if some public buildings don't respect certain accessibility standard. I deeply believe that digital is going toward the same journey. I only hope it's faster.
Sara, this is a beautiful last statement. Thank you so much for introducing us and guiding us on that. Also from the chat, we hear thank you for a great presentation. You'll stick around in the chat if there's questions about tools or tips coming up. Thank you so much.